The first thing Lila Monroe noticed when she stepped into her Manhattan loft was the silence. Not the calm, contented kind she craved after weeks of business travel. This was a tense, hollow silence, the kind that sat in your chest and whispered that something was wrong. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she dropped her luggage by the entryway. The air inside was colder than usual, and the scent of fresh lilies, ordered to greet her homecoming, was missing. So was the usual chorus of her staff's greetings. Only Ava, her assistant and right hand, appeared, eyes wide and uneasy. "Welcome home," Ava said, her voice too light, too quick. Lila's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" Ava blinked. "What?" "The dress, my dress. The Monroe original I've been working on for months. The one I sketched in Paris, stitched in Milan, and hand-beaded myself between fittings and breakdowns." Her tone sharpened. "Where is it?" Ava's lips parted, but no words came. A red flush crept up her neck. Lila was already moving. Her custom-designed bridal suite was at the end of the hall, past the gold-trimmed double doors. She flung them open, nearly tearing them off their hinges. The room looked untouched, spotless, pristine, curated like a magazine spread. Except for one thing. The dress was gone. Not misplaced, not buried beneath garment bags. Gone. She stood frozen in the center of the room, the echo of her heartbeat loud in her ears. That gown was more than silk and lace. It was her soul stitched into fabric. Her tribute to the future, the promise she was finally choosing herself after building a life around others' expectations. And now it had vanished. "I locked this room myself before I left," Lila murmured. "Only you, me, and Ivy have keys." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. That silence again, the kind that spoke volumes. Lila turned slowly to face her. "Ava, tell me Ivy didn't." But the sound of her phone buzzing stopped her cold. She reached into her handbag and lifted it to her ear. Her father's voice came through, frazzled. "Sweetheart, something's happened. You should come to the countryside chapel. Right away." A sharp chill snaked down Lila's spine. "Why? What's going on?" But he had already hung up. The drive to the countryside chapel blurred past in a rush of steel and storm clouds. Lila barely remembered how she got there. Only the pulse pounding in her ears and the way her father's voice had cracked before the call ended. Something had happened. Something he couldn't say out loud. As the car curved along the narrow, tree-lined road, the old stone chapel finally came into view, perched on a hill like a postcard. Beautiful, timeless, and utterly surreal. Cars lined the gravel lot. Guests in pastel dresses and pressed suits lingered at the edges, the hum of chatter riding on the spring wind. But none of this made sense. Her wedding wasn't supposed to be here. Her wedding wasn't supposed to be today. The driver barely had time to brake before Lila pushed the door open and stepped into the gravel. Her stilettos sank slightly into the earth, grounding her as she looked up at the whitewashed building she hadn't seen since childhood. Inside, the organ began to play a familiar, haunting tune, the wedding march. "No," she breathed. Her heels clicked urgently up the steps as she shoved through the heavy wooden doors. And then the world fell away. There, beneath a vaulted ceiling awash with golden light, stood Ivy. Her younger sister, her best friend, her bridesmaid. Wearing Lila's dress. The silk shimmered with every step Ivy took down the aisle, perfectly tailored to her figure. The fitted bodice, the delicate embroidery, the trailing veil Lila had commissioned with their mother's lace sewn into the hem. Lila's heart seized in her chest as her eyes darted past the crowd, to the man waiting at the altar. Daniel, her fiancé. His hands were clasped in front of him, face calm, unreadable. Not a trace of hesitation, not a flicker of guilt. He smiled as Ivy approached, like this moment had always been meant for them. Gasps rippled through the room. A few heads turned. Whispers buzzed like flies, but Lila couldn't hear any of it. Her hands clenched at her sides. Her breath came in shallow waves. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was surgical, precise, almost rehearsed. The officiant's voice echoed faintly. "Dearly beloved, Lila stepped forward, too stunned to scream, too proud to crumble. Her voice cracked like thunder in the sanctuary. "What the hell is going on?" The entire chapel turned. Ivy froze mid-step, her veil fluttering behind her like a curtain caught in a storm. Her eyes met Lila's, wide, glassy, trembling. Daniel turned, slow and cool. His expression was impossible to read. Lila stared at them, at the altar, at the fabric she had poured her soul into, now draped over someone else's dream. And for the first time in her life, Lila Monroe had no idea where she stood in her own story. The chapel pulsed with silence, thick, suffocating, alive with disbelief. Lila stood like a crack in a stained glass window, jagged and frozen, while Ivy slowly turned to face her. Tears shimmered in Ivy's eyes. Not from joy, not even from guilt. From dread. "Lila," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the echoing organ fade. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Lila blinked. "You mean you knew I'd find out?" Daniel stepped forward then, his face unnervingly calm. That same businesslike smile he wore when talking investors off a ledge. "It's not what you think." "Really?" Lila's voice trembled, not from fragility, but from the weight of rage trying to keep itself from screaming. "Because it looks like my sister stole my wedding dress, hijacked my wedding date, and is now marrying my fiancé. Do enlighten me." The guests squirmed in their pews. Some tried to discreetly leave, others stayed, hungry for the wreckage. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Ivy said, stepping forward. Her bouquet trembled in her grip. "It just happened. We didn't plan it." Lila's laugh came sharp and bitter. "Didn't plan it? You're standing there in my dress, at my altar." Daniel sighed, as if this whole thing was inconvenient. "We didn't want to lie, Lila, but you were always traveling, always chasing something. Lila's eyes snapped to him. "We what?" He hesitated for only a moment. "We fell in love." The words landed like shrapnel. Ivy's chin quivered, her voice cracking under the weight of confession. "It started after the Paris trip. You were gone so long, and Daniel, he was lonely. We never meant for it to go this far. But when he proposed—" "I never proposed to you," Daniel cut in suddenly. His tone was flat, clinical. "That was a misunderstanding." Lila blinked. "What are you talking about?" Daniel turned to her with unnerving detachment. "That ring, your engagement ring, it wasn't meant for you, it was your grandmother's. I brought it out during the holidays, intending to ask Ivy's permission to give it to her. But your mother handed it to you first, thinking it was yours. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of everyone." A low murmur rolled through the chapel. Lila took a step back. Her throat felt dry, her pulse thunderous in her ears. "So let me get this straight." Her voice was low now, trembling with control. "You two started sleeping together behind my back. Then you let me walk around with your ring. Plan my own wedding. Build my life around you. And not one of you had the decency to come clean." Ivy's tears fell freely now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "We didn't know how." Lila looked at her. Really looked. At the veil she had chosen. The shoes she had designed. Her own dream, transplanted onto someone else like it was nothing but a dress to borrow. "You knew exactly how," she whispered. "You just didn't care enough." And without another word, Lila turned and walked out of the chapel. Behind her, Ivy collapsed into a pew. Daniel didn't follow. Lila didn't cry. She was past tears. This wasn't heartbreak. This was war. 3 days. That's how long Lila disappeared. She turned off her phone, ignored every message, and vanished into the heart of the city where no one would think to find her. Not in designer lounges or penthouses, but a cheap hotel downtown where she could disappear under the weight of her own thoughts. She replayed it all in her mind. Ivy's trembling voice, Daniel's flat denial, the pity in the guest's eyes, her dress clinging to someone else's future. Grief was supposed to feel like sadness. But this was something different. This felt like theft. On the 4th day, her silence was broken. An email. No name. No subject line. Just a message that read, "She didn't just want your fiancé, she wanted your legacy. Check the will." Attached was a scanned page from her grandmother's estate documents. It was grainy and crooked, but unmistakable, a clause she'd never seen before. In the event of multiple potential female heirs, the first to marry in good standing shall inherit the Monroe estate, including all associated intellectual and corporate holdings. Lila read it once, then twice. Her pulse quickened. Her grandmother, Estelle Monroe, founder of one of the world's most iconic fashion empires, had always been known for her iron-fisted vision. She built everything Lila now called home, and apparently she'd built in rules to decide who inherited it, rules that had never been shared aloud, and Ivy had known. Lila's hands trembled as she scrolled back through old texts. Her mind raced to the subtle changes in Ivy's behavior over the last year, her sudden interest in branding, her innocent questions about estate law, her charm offensive at the board gala. None of it had seemed strange before. Now it screamed manipulation. Lila looked up from her laptop, her reflection staring back at her in the black screen, hollow-eyed, sharp-edged. They hadn't just broken her heart, they'd outplayed her, and now it all made sense. The wedding wasn't just romantic betrayal, it was strategic. Ivy didn't want Daniel. She wanted the company, the power, the name, and she'd used Lila's own absence to beat her to the finish line. Lila leaned back slowly, fury bubbling beneath the surface. Her world had been taken, not by accident, but by design. But the game wasn't over yet. She'd been raised in a dynasty built on ambition and cutthroat deals. Her grandmother may have questioned her strength, may have even doubted her place in the bloodline, but Lila wasn't going to let her legacy go down in a lace-trimmed ceremony. Not without a fight. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Ava. "You ready to burn it all down yet?" Lila smiled. "Yes." Lila's loft was transformed. Gone were the elegant gowns and delicate sketches scattered with careless grace. Instead, the space pulsed with purpose. Floor-to-ceiling mood boards, hastily pinned newspaper clippings, digital screens flashing Ivy's social media and fashion line announcements. Maps of Paris Fashion Week venues littered the table, dotted with strategic notes and timelines. Ava paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating whispers of alliances and contacts in the industry. The atmosphere was electric, a war room disguised as a creative studio. "Daniel's out of the picture," Ava murmured, eyes sharp with excitement and caution. "He vanished after the wedding fiasco. No calls, no texts, like a ghost." Lila nodded, fingers tracing the edge of a photo pinned above the desk. Ivy, radiant in her wedding dress, smiling like she'd already won. "Good." Lila's voice was low, steady. "Because Ivy's not just stealing dresses and men, she's after the empire. And I'm going to take it back." That's when Sebastian stepped in. A former flame of Ivy's, bitter, charismatic, and hungry for redemption. He slammed a manila folder onto the table. "I've got dirt on Ivy," Sebastian said, eyes glinting with vengeful satisfaction. "Financial irregularities, backdoor deals with suppliers, even a sketch or two ripped straight from your archives." Ava smirked, flipping through the folder. "Not bad, but we'll need more than dirt. We need a public takedown." Lila's gaze sharpened. "Paris Fashion Week. That's where Ivy plans to launch her bridal collection. Original designs she's been flaunting like trophies." Ava nodded. "We crash the show. Expose her as a fraud in front of the industry. Buyers, media, the world." Sebastian grinned, dark and dangerous. "And if she tries to fight back, we'll be ready," Lila said, her lips curling into a confident smile. But beneath the surface, a deeper truth gnawed at her. This wasn't just about fashion. It was about blood, power, the legacy her grandmother built, and the lies that protected it. Lila looked at her allies, a mix of loyalty, bitterness, and shared purpose. The game was set, and Ivy had no idea what was coming. The room buzzed with quiet tension, thick with the scent of espresso and anticipation. Lila stood at the center of her loft, no longer just a designer, but a strategist ready to reclaim everything lost. Her eyes flicked between the small group gathered before her, each playing a crucial role in what she dubbed the Phoenix Plan. Ava, Ever loyal and fiercely intelligent, tapped away on her tablet, pulling up Ivy's latest social feeds and corporate filings. We've tracked Ivy's every move since the wedding, suppliers, investors, even her personal calendar. She's walking a tightrope, and one misstep will send her plummeting. Sebastian leaned back, arms crossed. His dark eyes glinted with a mixture of old pain and new purpose. Ivy's not just reckless, she's desperate. She's been playing a long game, but the cracks are showing. We just need to push the right buttons. Lila's voice was steady but fiery. This isn't about revenge, at least not anymore. It's about justice. Ivy stole from me, from our family, but I won't stoop to her level. Sebastian scoffed. Justice? That's a luxury in our world. We play dirty or get played. Before Lila could respond, a new voice cut through the room, sharp, measured, and unexpected. Actually, I think we have more leverage than we realize. All eyes turned to the newcomer, Lila Monroe, a rival fashion mogul known for her cutthroat tactics and impeccable taste. She stepped forward, her gaze locked on Lila with a mix of respect and calculation. Ivy's about to unveil her bridal line at Paris Fashion Week, Elise explained, voice smooth as silk. But those designs, they're knockoffs of your sketches, aren't they? I have people on the inside. We can expose her plagiarism. Publicly. Ava raised an eyebrow. And what's your angle? Elise smiled, a flash of steel beneath the charm. Let's just say Ivy's rise threatens more than your family's legacy. My brand's market share is at risk. We have mutual interests. Lila considered the alliance risky, unpredictable, but powerful. Fine, but the moment this turns into a personal vendetta, I'm out. Elise nodded, her expression unreadable. Understood. The plan began to crystallize. Expose Ivy's lies, sabotage her runway debut, and reclaim the empire that was rightfully Lila's. As the team strategized late into the night, Lila felt a fierce new energy rising within her, a phoenix stirring from ashes, ready to soar. The game had changed, and so had she. The air in the Parisian backstage area was thick with anticipation, and something else, a quiet undercurrent of war. Lila stood just beyond the velvet ropes, her gaze sharp beneath the bright lights, watching Ivy's team bustle around the venue. Models flitted like butterflies, their gowns shimmering under spotlights that promised glamour but hid shadows. Ivy's collection was the talk of the week, a bold, bridal line lauded for its originality and fierce modernity. But Lila knew the truth. Each sketch, every delicate lace applique, was a copy of her own designs, ripped off and repackaged by Ivy and her complicit producers. Ava handed her a tablet, scrolling through a folder marked proof. Contracts with forged signatures, manufacturing notes with suspiciously familiar fabrics, and the unmistakable blueprint of Lila's signature embroidery. This, Ava said quietly, is the smoking gun. Sebastian paced nearby, his jaw clenched. Ivy's never been this exposed before. The industry's about to turn on her, fast. Lila's heart hammered, not with fear, but a fierce, controlled fire. It was time. Her own team moved with precision, stylists readying her unexpected countershow, PR specialists briefing the press, and legal advisors preparing cease and desist notices. Every piece was a part of the trap. As the curtains drew back for Ivy's debut, Lila slipped to the side entrance, dressed in a sleek power suit that screamed command and defiance. The room hushed as Ivy's models began their procession, the crowd captivated by what seemed a flawless show. Then Lila took the stage. A hush fell, replaced by gasps. Models wore Lila's original creations, vibrant, breathtaking, and unmistakably authentic, walking alongside projections flashing Ivy's copied designs side by side, labeled with dates, contracts, and undeniable evidence of theft. Lila's voice rang out, steady and clear. This is the truth behind Ivy Monroe's original bridal collections. She named names, showed documents, and tore apart the carefully crafted illusion Ivy had built. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs into murmurs of disbelief. Ivy's face, once radiant, tightened into a mask of shock and rage. And just as the crowd's attention snapped to Lila's bold exposé, a shadow flickered at the edge of the room. Daniel. He slipped away quietly, disappearing into the chaos. The trap had sprung perfectly, but the fallout was The Grand Hall of the Palais des Congrès buzzed with anticipation, the murmur of the elite fashion crowd mingling with the soft clatter of heels on polished floors. Ivy stood behind the curtains, a fragile smile painted on her lips, unaware that the world she built on lies was moments from collapse. Lila's entrance was electric. Dressed in a tailored black blazer, her hair pulled back with purposeful elegance, she strode confidently onto the stage, commandeering the spotlight like a seasoned queen reclaiming her throne. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lila's voice rang out crystal clear above the orchestra of gasps and whispers. "What you are about to see is not just a fashion show, it's a reckoning." As Ivy's models continued their walk, Lila's team rolled out screens lining the runway's edge, projecting side-by-side images. Ivy's bridal gowns matched with Lila's original sketches, dated, signed, and unmistakably authentic. Contracts flashed on the screen, ink signatures forged, prototypes ruined by sabotage, buttons missing, hems frayed, the craftsmanship exposed as a farce. Ava stepped forward, holding up a torn sample of fabric embroidered with Lila's signature motif, one that Ivy's team had tried to replicate but failed. Every stitch, every design, every promise Ivy made was stolen, Lila declared. This show is built on theft and deception. The crowd erupted into whispers, then a ripple of outrage. Ivy's facade cracked. Her eyes darted wildly, her composure crumbling as the evidence stacked against her like bricks in a wall. And then, silence. Daniel slipped out the back entrance, avoiding the chaos he had helped ignite. Ivy collapsed into a chair, face pale and trembling. The industry had witnessed her downfall live, a public humiliation broadcast across social media within minutes. Lila stood tall amid the storm, not a victor basking in triumph, but a woman who had taken back what was hers, piece by painful piece. The morning after the sabotage show, the world woke to a media frenzy unlike anything Ivy Monroe or the Monroe legacy had ever faced. Headlines screamed from every fashion magazine and news outlet, "Fashion's greatest betrayal. Ivy Monroe exposed as a fraud. Stolen designs and broken promises. The fall of a rising star. Lila Monroe, the true heiress, fights back." Social media ignited with hashtags, viral videos, and furious debates. Clips of Lila's bold confrontation at Paris Fashion Week circulated endlessly, millions watching as Ivy's empire crumbled before their eyes. Ivy's carefully cultivated image shattered overnight. Sponsors pulled their support, investors withdrew promises, and industry insiders whispered of her fall from grace. At the center of the storm, Ivy was alone. Daniel, whose betrayal had started it all, vanished completely. No calls, no texts, no sign. His silence was a loud echo, a tacit admission of guilt and cowardice. In the cold quiet of her penthouse, Ivy sat curled on the floor, scrolling through messages, mocking, angry, and merciless. The only familiar name among the storm was Sebastian's, reaching out with a mix of anger and pity. Meanwhile, Lila was thrust into a different kind of spotlight. Interviews flooded in. Offers poured through. The press hailed her as the rightful heir who dared to challenge the darkness within her own family. Yet, behind her poised smile, Lila wrestled with a complex mix of triumph and emptiness. The empire was hers to claim, but at a price far higher than she'd ever imagined. As the world watched Ivy's slow unraveling, one question lingered in the air, whispered in back rooms and board meetings: could this scandal truly be the end? The silence in Ivy's old childhood home was unsettling, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Sebastian, drawn by a mix of lingering feelings and a desperate need for answers, sifted through dusty boxes left behind when Ivy fled the city. His fingers trembled as he unearthed a worn, leather-bound keepsake box, its clasp tarnished but intact. Inside were fragments of a life Ivy had hidden, faded photographs, old letters, and a sealed manila envelope marked with a name Sebastian didn't recognize. Curious, he pried it open. What he found stopped him cold. Documents that contradicted everything he thought he knew. An adoption file listing Ivy's original last name, one that wasn't Monroe, and signatures that didn't match Lila's mother, Mary Ann. Handwritten notes revealed a secret arrangement, a shadowy family pact whispered about but never confirmed. Ivy was not a Monroe by blood, Sebastian's mind raced. Could the sister he'd once loved be someone else entirely? Was Ivy's betrayal rooted in a desperate bid to belong rather than greed? The files raised more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. The tangled web of family secrets ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Sebastian closed the box carefully, his resolve hardening. This was no longer just a battle over fashion or legacy. It was a fight for the truth. Lila sat alone in the sterile white room of the private clinic, the sterile scent hanging heavy in the air. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the swabs to the technician, one labeled for herself, the other for Ivy. She hadn't told anyone she was doing this. Not Ava, not Sebastian, and certainly not Ivy. The secrets uncovered by Sebastian's files begged for confirmation, and Lila needed to know the truth for herself. As the machine hummed quietly, Lila's mind spiraled through years of memories, childhood moments blurred by the recent betrayals, the silent tension beneath family smiles, and the unspoken questions that had haunted her for years. When the results arrived, Lila's breath caught. The lab report was clear. No biological relation. Ivy was not her sister. The realization hit like a storm, shattering the fragile remnants of trust and the complex bond they'd shared. It explained the unexplainable moments of distance, the shadow of secrecy in their mother's eyes, and the gnawing feeling that something vital had been kept hidden. But the truth was more than just a revelation. It was a fracture, a line drawn through her family's story. Lila's heart ached, not only for the sister she thought she knew, but for the complicated woman Ivy really was. A stranger in her own home, yet bound by the ties of a shared past. And yet, in that painful truth, a new clarity emerged. This was no longer a fight between sisters, but a battle for the legacy, and for Lila's own identity. As Lila left the clinic, the weight of the truth settled around her like a mantle. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was undeniable. Everything she thought she knew about family was about to change. The storm outside cracked against the windows of the Monroe estate as Lila sat in the old study, Sebastian beside her, both staring at the documents that confirmed what the DNA test already revealed. Ivy was not her sister. But why had the truth been buried for so long? The answer came in the form of a weathered photo album tucked in the back of her grandmother's armoire. Between its pages, Lila found the missing pieces of a story no one had dared tell. Flashbacks unfolded like worn film reels. Grainy snapshots of another life. Years ago, there had been a car crash. A young girl, barely 5, had been the sole survivor of a wreck on a stormy night. She was nameless, parentless, and hospitalized in the same wing where Marianne Monroe, grieving the recent loss of a second pregnancy, had been recovering. Lila's grandmother, Victoria Monroe, the formidable matriarch who built the fashion empire, saw opportunity in tragedy. She pulled strings. Quietly arranged the girl's adoption. A fabricated name. A falsified birth certificate. The world never questioned it. To Lila, Ivy simply appeared in their lives around the age of 6. Introduced as a cousin who lost her parents. Later just seamlessly called sister. Lila never questioned it. Children rarely do. But Victoria hadn't adopted Ivy out of kindness. She had molded Ivy, disciplined, charismatic, endlessly driven, to be her legacy. Where Lila was artistic and sensitive, Ivy was precise and ruthless. Victoria saw in her the perfect heir, a replacement for the child she deemed too soft to carry the Monroe name into the future. All those years, Ivy had lived a lie she didn't choose, but one she ultimately embraced, groomed to believe she was chosen, conditioned to compete. And now? She was left with nothing but that lie. Lila closed the album with trembling hands, the storm still raging outside. Her grief was layered now, mourning a sister who never was, a grandmother whose love had conditions, and a childhood built on unspoken betrayal. But in the ashes of those revelations, Lila found something else too. Clarity. She wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore, she was fighting to reclaim the truth. And in doing so, rewrite the legacy. The Monroe estate was silent in a way that felt sacred, as if the walls themselves were holding her breath. Lila stood alone in her grandmother's private study, a room long sealed since Victoria's death. The key had arrived 2 days earlier in an unmarked envelope along with a handwritten note. "You've earned the right to see what was always yours." The desk was untouched, covered in dust, but inside the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a false panel, she found it. The final addendum to Victoria Monroe's will. Dated, notarized and witnessed. Legal. Binding. And shocking. The Monroe legacy is not inherited by blood alone. It belongs to the one who proves strength in adversity, vision under fire, and grace amidst betrayal. It was signed in her grandmother's tight, angular hand. To Lila Monroe, should she rise above the treachery laid at her feet, she shall receive the entire estate, the fashion house, and all rights therein. Ivy's marriage shall not suffice. A Monroe is made, not named. The words hit Lila like a tide, crashing and cleansing at once. It had never been about marriage. Not really. That clause in the will Ivy had clung to was a decoy, a test, a final design in Victoria's relentless blueprint. Ivy had tried to steal the throne, but Lila had passed the true test. She had survived betrayal, heartbreak, sabotage, and still stood tall. As Lila turned to leave, she caught her reflection in the antique mirror. She didn't look like the girl who had once dreamed of a perfect wedding. She looked like a woman who had built something far more powerful herself. Outside, her team waited. Ava with hopeful eyes, Sebastian now more ally than rival. Journalists circled like birds, sensing a new queen ascending. Lila emerged from the house with the original Monroe deed in hand, the dawn breaking behind her. She didn't have to claw her way back anymore, she had arrived. The night was quiet, but inside Lila, a storm raged. She sat alone in the penthouse suite of a luxury hotel overlooking the city skyline, her name now officially attached to Monroe House. The press had dubbed her the heiress who rose from ruin. The board had voted unanimously. Her designs were lauded as revolutionary. She had everything Ivy had tried to take. And yet, her hands were shaking. The call came just after midnight. Ava's voice, brittle and urgent. "It's Ivy, she tried to kill herself." Lila dropped everything. She found Ivy unconscious in a sterile hospital room, tubes in her arms, monitors beeping steadily, like the ticking of a second chance. Her pale skin made the bruised eyeliner beneath her lashes seem deeper, more fragile. This wasn't the poised, vicious woman who had stood on the Fashion Week stage. This was someone shattered. The nurse handed Lila a folded piece of paper. Ivy's handwriting, shaky but familiar. "I don't belong anywhere. I was made into someone I never asked to be. And I'm sorry, I don't even know who I stole from anymore. You, myself, or no one. But you win, Lila. You always did. Just don't become her." Lila read it again and again until her tears blurred the ink. She thought of everything she had endured. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation, the legacy stolen and reclaimed. And now, here was the person who had inflicted it all. Broken, voiceless, and small. No cameras, no applause, no throne to claim. Just a decision, a choice. She could leave Ivy behind, let justice and karma do the rest. Cement herself as a cold, victorious queen atop the empire. Or she could be something else, something more than what her grandmother had groomed any of them to be. Lila reached out and gently took Ivy's hand. Not as a sister, not even as a friend, but as a woman who understood the cost of pain and chose not to pass it on. As dawn broke over the city, Lila made her decision. She would take the throne. But she would rule differently. A week had passed since the hospital. Ivy was stable, resting under psychiatric care in a discreet facility paid for quietly by Lila. The world had moved on, but Lila remained suspended in a strange quiet, not victorious, not broken, just waiting. It was in the attic of the Monroe estate that she found the last piece. The envelope was unmarked, hidden inside an old trunk filled with Victoria Monroe's personal belongings. Childhood diaries, swatches from early collections, half-written letters. At the very bottom was a single envelope with her name, Lila. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated nearly a decade earlier. The paper smelled of lavender and age. "My dearest Lila, if you're reading this, the truth has demanded its day. Ivy, she is your sister. Not adopted, not a stranger. but your half-sister. Years ago, your father had an affair. A brief, hidden thing. The result was Ivy. Her mother died young. I intervened to protect the Monroe name and raised her in secret as family, but never equal. I shaped her to be what I feared you would never become: ruthless, brilliant, impenetrable. I made a mistake. In doing so, I hurt you both. Lila's heart thudded. It had never been about one sister being better than the other. It had always been about control. Her grandmother hadn't tested them out of love, but fear. Fear that softness was weakness, that bloodlines needed manipulation to survive. I leave you with the truth now, and the choice I never gave either of you. Build something new, or become me. Tears slipped down Lila's face, not for the betrayal this time, but for the legacy they'd all inherited. A dynasty built not just on design, but deception. Later, on the final night of Fashion Week, Lila stood at the end of her runway wearing a sharp black power suit of her own design, clean lines, silver threading, and a single crimson stitch on the lapel like a scar made visible. The lights dimmed. The audience held its breath. The spotlight found her. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because the final look of the night was her. And as the crowd erupted, she knew. The question wasn't whether she had won. It was whether winning had ever really mattered.